Hey there, Second Act Success podcast fans. It's your buddy Adam from Podcasting Business School. That's the podcast where I help frustrated podcasters learn how to stop hearing crickets and start making money, even if you have a small audience. Check out episode 281, where I help you discover where you're at in the podcasting success timeline. You are listening to the Second Act Success podcast, and it's time to bring out your host, my pod pal, Shannon Russell.
Are you at a crossroads in your career or in life? Well, don't worry, because life's next chapter is waiting. This is the Second Act Success podcast. I'm your host, Shannon Russell. I'm a television producer turned boy mom, turned business owner, podcaster, and career coach. If you are looking to start a new career or begin a fresh chapter in life, then get ready to be inspired with stories of women who have done just that. We will share advice and offer steps you can take to help figure out what your true calling in life really is. It is time to shine, so let's turn the page and get started. Welcome to Second Act Success. Hi there, today is Tuesday, October 11th, and it's National Coming Out Day. In honor of today, I have Anne-Marie Zanzal on the podcast to discuss how coming out later in life has affected her and her career. Anne-Marie is a mom of 4 kids. She became an ordained minister in her 40s, and at the age of 52, she came out as a lesbian and now coaches other women on how to make the process of coming out just a little bit easier. Here's my conversation with Anne-Marie Zanzal. Anne-Marie, welcome to Second Act Success.
Thank you, Shannon. I'm so excited to be here.
Me too. And before we started recording, we were chatting about how you don't just have a second act, you have many, many acts, and I can't wait to dive into all of them. Why don't you start by telling me where your journey kind of began?
Well, I think my first act was being an incredible rebel. I didn't go to college until I was like 22 years old. I had a very difficult childhood. There was a lot of chaos in my home in which I grew up. And so, like a lot of kids that grow up in chaotic homes, I just sort of was floundering. And so for about 3-4 years, I sort of just, had odd jobs, did a lot of drugs, and just sort of floated around for like 4 years. And then I went back to college when I was 22 and I was really driven. I did 3.5 years of work in 2.5 years. So that was probably my first act. And at that time, I met my now ex-husband, and we ended up getting married and having 4 children. And so I had 4 babies from 27 to 39, and really spent most of that time in my life raising children, and went back and started working part-time for Girl Scouts. And within 5 years, I was running the adult development and training department of Girl Scouts where I worked. And I really, really enjoyed that time in my life, but unexpectedly got pregnant when I was 38 years old. And my ex-husband and I did not have the ability to think outside the box. So I ended up, leaving that job and staying home with my son, who's now 20. And I had a lot of fun with him because it was the first time I just had one kid. So I had a lot of fun when he was little. And then I felt the call to ministry.
You graduated from Yale Divinity School, is that right?
Right. And I really consider that maybe my second act. So I went back to Yale Divinity School when I was 42 years old. I had 4 kids at the time. I'd grown up Catholic, and there's really no places for Catholic women in the church unless you want to be a nun. And I didn't want to be a nun. I wanted to have kids and stuff like that. So I really never thought that ministry could be a possibility for me. And so when I was about 40 years old, which is pretty appropriate because it's midlife, and that's when a lot of us start making changes to our lives at that point. So I decided to go back to divinity school, and my desire was to become a chaplain because I wanted to work with people in the medical field, and so I did work in hospitals and hospices for about 10 years. I know you're having me on this show because I came out later in life as a lesbian at 52 years old. So the way I generally tell this story is that, I always sort of noticed my attraction for women. But I grew up in a very strict Catholic home. It was the mid 1980s. And because AIDS was all around us, there was a lot of homophobia out there. So when I noticed my attraction to women, I didn't know like how to act upon it. I didn't know like, how do you meet people? I didn't have any gay friends at the time. I'm sure I had gay friends, but not in the sense that I could hang out with and go do things. And I remember at the time asking like my straight friends if they wanted to go to the gay bar in the next town, and everybody was like, no. And so, I just didn't really pursue it. And then I had the babies and I got married and had the kids. And like a lot of women in my 30s raising children, I didn't think about sex at all. And honestly, I didn't think about my sexuality at all. Literally did not think about it. No.
All you can think about is the kids. I mean, that is such a big chunk of our adulthood, right? It's just being a mom.
Children. Yeah. Children. And it doesn't stop. My kids are now 20 to 31, and I still spend a lot of time thinking about my kids.
They're always our focus.
They're always our focus. There's just a lot of them. There's so many of them when you have
You've got four. Oh my gosh. I have 2. So I commend you.
That's a lot too. This was all happening when I went back to Yale Divinity School and stuff like that. I read an article in Oprah Winfrey magazine, which talked about the fluidity of women's sexuality. And all of a sudden, I had words to put to my experience. Mm-hmm. And it literally was life-changing for me when I read that article, because I realized that although I had started on the straight path, I wasn't going to have to stay there forever. So I said to my then 16-year-old daughter, if Dad and I don't work out or something happens, I said, don't be surprised if I end up with a woman. And it's so funny. She has no memory of this conversation. So it wasn't really life-changing to her. It was to me. I think she was the first person I actually verbally ever came out to, in reflection. I didn't think about it that much at that time. So I went to Yale Divinity School, and I was a really good ally. A lot of later in life people who come out later in life, they often are amazing allies. They've been allies before they start realizing they might actually be gay or trans or something like that. And so I was such a great little ally. I was going to go to the coming out day ceremony, and National Coming Out Day is October 11th. And all of a sudden in the middle of that, I started crying hysterically. And that was really the point in my life where I realized I was gay. Yes, I definitely was gay, but I didn't I couldn't figure out how do I make all the changes I need to in my life to be able to live my life as authentically as possible. So I spent the next 6 years trying to figure that out. I went to a lot of therapists, got a lot of bad therapy. A lot of times when people, especially women who've been married a long time, and I'm going to assume men, if you bring it up to a therapist that you think you might be gay, sometimes they really dismiss it. One of my therapists said, have you ever slept with a woman? And I said, no. And then she didn't talk about it again. And I didn't bring it up again. And the next one was in marriage therapy. It was actually with a lesbian therapist. I told her in marriage therapy that I thought I was gay, and she sort of dismissed it, and said, oh, it could be because of the relationship you had with your mother. And it's so funny because you can insert the eye roll here, because lots of queer people are told, no matter, if you're a gay man or a lesbian woman, it's always is your mother's fault, right? Oh. So then in 2016, I was finally ordained, and I was taking my sister back to the airport the next day. And I said to her, this ministry stuff I do is super, super hard, and I need a soft place to land. And, my ex and I weren't doing very well again. So I went back into therapy with the same therapist. And make a long story short, one of my hospice patients was one of those women that signed on to hospice and thought she was going to die the next day. And she lived for about 8 months. And during that time, she said to me, I think I've been waiting for something my entire life. And it was one of those times when someone says something to you that sort of hits you to the core. And unfortunately, she had a really bad death in hospice. and I held her while she died. And I kept saying to her, you can go, you can go, you can go. So when I went back into therapy, I had some PTSD from this. So I told Jane that we had this conversation about how she said she thought she was waiting for something. And to be very clear, she wasn't gay or anything. Oh. There was other things. Jane said to me, like the consummate therapist that she was, what have you been waiting for, Anne-Marie? And this time I said, well, I think I'm gay. And then I started crying and I said, this is going to open up a Pandora's box. And she said, no, it doesn't have to. And I'm so glad she lied that night.
Because it really did. But
it did, yeah.
You didn't need to hear it then.
Well, it was, and actually, I'm really glad she lied that night. I really needed to hear her say that it was going to not be a Pandora's box, but it was.
How did you feel just releasing that?
Well, the thing is, Shannon, I had done that a couple of times before. So it felt real that time. Like the other two times it was sort of tentatively, talking about that. And, this is the thing is that I was looking for professionals to tell me that I was gay. But really the only person that can tell you whether you're gay, straight, trans, non-binary, whatever you identify is yourself. Mm-hmm. And so I was looking for the experts, but really the expert in my sexuality is me. Mm-hmm. And so I had to learn to listen to my own voice.
And so that when you did that, then that Pandora's box, if you will, was with your ex-husband and your family and probably all of your, just your day-to-day that now needed to be changed.
Yes. There's like sort of a trope in our later in life community. One of the reasons is because of the pandemic. A lot of people had a lot of times to think. And so I've seen a lot of people making a lot of second act choices after the pandemic. But one of the tropes is that, you tell your husband you're gay. And then what people do is that they try to save their marriage. And so they have these conversations about polyamory. They have conversations about opening up their marriages and even threesomes. And my ex-husband and I had all of those conversations. And really, for us, it was a quick dismissal of all of them because that's not what I wanted. I honestly wanted, and I think I knew at the time, that my emotional, spiritual, and intellectual needs are met by a woman. And they just can't be met by a man because that's not who I am. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting at the age that you were when this happened, you were a different person than when you were in your 30s. So you were able to really realize what you needed fully. Whereas if this happened earlier in life, you might have just dismissed it, tried something else. And in midlife, you're saying, okay, yeah, I know who I am at my core.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was really interesting is that I think one of the reasons, so even though it was hard for me, I had done so much therapy. And because I had become a chaplain, I did something called clinical pastoral education, which is an action reflection model. You take care of people, that's the action, and then you do the reflection, and you do it within a group with the supervisor. And so I had done an internship and a residency. So I had done so much work on myself. I had to accept the fact that I was gay, but I didn't have other things to work. I, like so many people, a lot of times start this journey with their queerness, but then they have a lot of other things that they have to deal with before they can really, really address their queerness, or they address it first. It's just really hard for a lot of people. I had to sort of figure out what does it mean for me and what does it mean for my life.
Mm-hmm. How is your family?
So that's such a challenging question to answer because my kids are 4 individuals. At the time, they were 24 to 12. What I always tell my clients is that children react to news like this based on who they are as human beings. Mm. I always tell my clients, I find that little kids, especially if you're telling them that you're gay, that are like 9 or under, 10 or under, they could care less. they don't have the prejudices that other people have. So when I hear one of my clients has an 8-year-old or a 7-year-old, a lot of times I say, this doesn't even have to be like a really huge conversation. You know, you can just say, yeah, Mommy, are you going to have a boyfriend again? And you say, no, I'm just going to have a girlfriend next time. That's like literally what you have to do. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be a big conversation. So my kids were a little older, and the kids that are older, anywhere 12 to about 50.
Yeah.
They struggled. My oldest child and my youngest child did the best. Mm-hmm. My oldest child, because I think she really knew the struggles I had in their marriage, my marriage with her father. Mm-hmm. And my youngest child, because he had to go through it, because he was still living at home. He had to do the 2-house thing. He really like accepted everything so much quicker. My 2 middles, they were away at college. They were living their life. And they had a really hard time, because there's 2 things going on. Yeah, your mom's gay, but also, oh, mom and dad are getting divorced.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's a lot for kids, and we've had our ups and downs. But everything's good now, and the kids are fine. My wife and I got married last year. They all came to the wedding. But it's been really hard. It's really hard. I don't want to paint a picture that like, you know, everybody's around, you know, singing around, you know, holding hands and singing Kumbaya, because a lot of times that doesn't happen. That happens once in a while, but most divorces and kids, especially if they're older, they just don't like the change.
Right. Any change.
Yeah. Yeah. And unless your child's been raised in a homophobic home or a homophobic religion, most kids, the gay part is not a big deal to them, especially with the Gen Zs.
Oh, yeah.
It's the divorce stuff. Kids don't want mom and dad to get divorced. No matter how, you know, even adult children don't want mom and dad to get divorced.
1,000%. And I think you're right. It's like I have a 7-year-old and 10-year-old, and, you know, one of my best friends is engaged to his boyfriend, and it's just totally normal for them, which is wonderful. I think, you know, that absolutely. Generation is just, it's totally the norm. But you're right. Any change is difficult, and it's just you dealing with a lot of the change within yourself too. So it's a lot that you're dealing with internally, and then you're dealing as a mom, you know, going back to the mom takes over everything factor.
Yeah. And it was also like, for example, doing things that I hadn't done before as a mother. My wife is from Nashville, and about 2.5 years after coming out, I moved down here, and my youngest son stayed at home in his father's home. He didn't want to move, and I didn't want to force him. So I ended up going back and forth. So once a month I would go and spend a week back in Connecticut. And it has been very interesting because he was raised so differently than his siblings, because I was a very around mom when they were growing up. And so they had a hard time imagining that there was another way that a child could be raised. And so my youngest has been raised with, you know, me living somewhere else. I missed him greatly, but he is absolutely fine. It was his normal. So he was just used to it, but I had to. It was I just needed to do that. A lot of gay people move when they come out, because it's just, you want a fresh start. It's hard to be, hey, you know, she used to be a straight married woman with 4 kids, and now she's living as an out lesbian. So I really wanted to have some queer community around me. And so my wife is from Nashville, and, you know, she had a ton of community down here. And so I ended up moving down here and ended up having community.
So how did you meet her?
I met her online. We were in a Facebook group. I Googled late in life lesbian. Okay. And I found a Facebook group for other women who were in the process of coming out. My wife was asked by the founder of the group, hey, does anybody want to go do this group? And so my wife said, sure. At the time, her and her past partner, they'd been together 15 years. They had just broken up like a year or so before. And she was like, sure, I can help out. She goes, maybe I'll meet somebody. I remember seeing some of her early posts. So that's how we met. And it was really funny, because my therapist said to me, hey, you know, as you move forward in this journey, what kind of woman would you like to meet? And I said, well, I would like to meet somebody with no kids, because I have 4, and that's too many. And then I also said, I'd like to meet somebody who's been out for a really long time. I said, because I know there's a culture that I don't know anything about. And I'd love for someone to help me with that. And I always joke that my wife, her name is Tanda, gave me the crash course in being a lesbian because she helped me with all those things that I just didn't know. And then thirdly, I wanted somebody with a respect for faith and religion because I am a minister. And she does. And the funny thing is, she really literally messaged me 3 days later. And we were friends for about 6 months before we started flirting. And then once we started flirting, all bets were off. That was it.
Oh.
And here I sit in Nashville, Tennessee.
Oh, married again and so
married
happy.
again. Yeah, very happy, very happy. I could have lived with my wife for the rest of my life. But, the right to marry for gay people happened only in 2015. That was only 7 years ago. My wife never had the opportunity to be married before. And so it was incredibly important to her. And so because I love her, I got married again. We had an amazing wedding. We had friends in from all over the country. And we did a lot of partying, and we really wanted to have it at home because we thought, we love to dance. Oh, we'll dance all night. Well, the night before we did karaoke for like 5 hours at the house. And by the night of the wedding, everybody was exhausted. The wedding ended like at 10:30. If we had been 30 years younger, we might have been able to hang out a little bit longer, but we were just all too tired. So we had an amazing wedding. We really did.
Just to have everybody there to celebrate this new chapter, literally, how exciting. That's just wonderful.
Yeah, it was really, we had a lot of fun and never expected to be married again. Like when I talk about it, it just makes me feel happy inside.
Hey, my friend, it's Shannon. I'm just popping in for a quick sec to let you know that the doors to my Second Act Accelerator course are closing on Friday. The course officially begins on Monday, October 17th. You can check it out now at secondactsuccess.co/course. If you are thinking about making a change in life and starting a second act, then you've got to join this program. It's an 8-week course designed to help you map out steps to get you from where you are now to where you want to be. You'll get one-on-one coaching with me, plus weekly group coaching, live weekly workshops, plus guest experts to help you in areas like resume writing, crafting a perfect LinkedIn profile, and even branding and web design. You will also have lifetime access to our Second Act community, where we'll share ideas, give feedback, and support each other on this journey. Go to secondactsuccess.co/course to learn more. You can also contact me directly to set up a call where I can walk you through what you'll learn in this program personally. It's all at secondactsuccess.co/course. And now back to the interview. So you're married, you're living in Tennessee, you have this new life. So tell me about your work now. So you're still doing work as a minister, and you're also helping people, other women later in life that are coming out as well.
Yeah, just like you, I work with people, finding maybe their second, third, or fourth act. My own coming out was really, really challenging and really, really difficult. And yes, that Facebook group saved my life. But what I realized is that people need community. And so I started doing mutual support groups very soon after I came out, like 2 years. And it was really because I saw the women in the lesbian group that I was in really grieving so many losses. Even if you want the divorce, you still grieve your marriage. You still grieve what was. You grieve what you thought your life was going to be. A lot of times people grieve the relationships with their kids. A lot of people lose their faith community, which is often a big part of their life and stuff like that. So I just started doing mutual support groups. I had run mutual support groups for like 12 years, in hospice, and I'm a bereavement counselor. And so I started to do that, and then it started to grow from there. People ask me, would I see them one-on-one? And I have a lot of counseling experience. So I started to do that. And I do a lot of work with people who are in the process of coming out later in life. Generally, everybody has been female, whether cisgender, trans, or non-binary. But what I do is I help them work through their fear. I help them work through their own internalized homophobia. I help them work through their guilt and shame. And the guilt and shame is about being gay, but also the guilt and shame is about like wanting to get divorced. And, because people really worry about the effect divorce has on their kids and stuff like that. And I do a lot of grief work because there's a lot of grief in this journey. And I also help people celebrate joy because there's like, it's one of this very unique journey, Shannon, in which you're holding all this change and transition and sadness. And then on the other hand, all this joy, because like being with my wife when we were first together was like I felt like I was home, and it was so confusing to me because I had a home. But being with her made me feel like I was home. And what I realized is that it felt like home for me because she was my people. And that's where I belonged within the queer community. And later in life, by the way, everybody thinks, oh, it's 40, 50. No, it's really self-defined. My youngest person has been in their mid-20s. And my oldest people have been 75 plus. I've worked with several 70-year-olds who are coming out, realizing that they're gay at that time in their life. And actually one of them, she's like my star pupil. She's actually getting married again. So
she's in her 70s?
Yep, 72. It was interesting because my 70-something-year-old women, they have no time to waste. Right. They're like, I don't have time to waste. They go through the feelings very quickly because if they want to be in a relationship with somebody, they have to move. And they do.
That just makes me want to cry just hearing that, because you don't want to find yourself in that position feeling that way if you can help it. So the fact that these clients of yours are seeking your help to say, I want to feel happiness now while I can. Like, how significant is that? Whether you're in your 70s, 80s, to be able to do that.
Or 30, right?
Or 30.
And this is the thing, is that for the women I work with, it's about their queerness, their gayness, but waiting for something that you want. It's not just about being queer. If there is something that you know that you have to do and you've been waiting for it for your whole life and you keep putting it off, like you've wanted to quit your job and work full-time as a writer, and you keep putting it off and you keep putting it off and you keep putting it off, there's a reason why that's calling to you, because you may authentically be a writer. And you need to follow your heart, because if you don't, as someone who's worked with people dying, you will have regret at the end of your life. And I'm going to tell you, people have regret about the things they didn't do. If they've done something that they're not happy with, they don't have regret about that. They often make meaning from it. But if you say, I've always wanted to learn to fly an airplane, and then you didn't do that, you'll be telling your hospice chaplain, I really wish I learned to fly. It was something I always wanted to do. So if there is something that you want to do, if there is something that is calling you, my sexuality was calling me, you need to do it. Don't wait any longer. You can always find a reason why not to do it. So try to find a reason why to do it.
I agree so much. You're right. It doesn't have to be coming out. It can be just flying a plane, like you said. No one's going to do that but yourself. Like, we are the ones to make that step. No one else can make you come out. No one else can make you fly the plane. So it's just a matter of saying, I have this one life. And I tell my clients, and I talk about it a lot on the podcast, is like, we get one shot. So what are you waiting for? Try it. And like you said, you can always go back. You can always, maybe you can't go back to your marriage if you try it and it doesn't work.
No. Well, you may not be able to go back to your marriage, but by and large, we say something in my later in life community: straight girls don't lie awake at night wondering if they're gay. So if you're somebody who is laying awake at night wondering if you're gay or trans or something, chances are you probably are. And the thing is, you can, like, but even with all of that, you can leave your marriage. You can go into a relationship with a woman, and you can decide after that and say it doesn't work out. You can decide, say, okay, well, I think I'm going to be with men again, or I think I'm going to be alone. It's okay. You know? And I'm
Nothing
thinking
is
about
permanent.
you, Shannon. We just met, and where you were talking about how you had gone back to school and you were going to be a teacher. And you might have had regret if you never had tried that at the end of your life, but you tried it and you're like, okay, this isn't for me.
Right.
But I'm sure if we had time for a conversation, you could probably tell me, then this happened, then this happened, and then this happened. And now you have a successful podcast, you have your business, you have two businesses.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you hadn't tried that one thing and realized that it wasn't for you, you just may not have ended up where you are now. You know,
You're so right.
Mhm.
And everything that we try in life is something added to our life resume, if you will, you know, something
Absolutely.
that is just adding to the person that we are. And I love that you are helping other people find theirs when it's a rocky road and a very emotional time. And we were talking about this earlier too, is that on this podcast, we talk a lot about the threads between all of our different acts. And I was saying to you that I feel like your thread, in my opinion, is service. You have had a life of service, whether it was you raising 4 kids, you being a grief counselor, you working in hospice, you now helping women coming out. All of these aspects to you are really truly giving back to other people and serving. Would
Mhm.
you agree that that is kind of a thread?
Well, you know, like the joke I made when we were talking about it, or I'm horribly codependent, one or the other.
Or that.
Or that. Well, you know, this is the thing, is I was raised Catholic and I went to Catholic school. And really, as a young child, I was schooled in service. And there are some really negative things about what happened because, for example, a lot of times women just put themselves second or third all the time,
Mm-hmm.
especially in their relationships with their families. They do for everybody else except for them. So I've done that, but I don't do that anymore at all. I was really, really trained to work for the good of others. My first job out of college, I was administrative assistant to a president of a company, and I hated that job with like a passion. And I remember thinking, I don't want to work when it has no meaning. So when I went back to work and I started working for Girl Scouts, I really loved that job. I couldn't work anymore for a company that made widgets. Like I could never do the corporate culture. And now that I have been a coach for the last 4 years, I could never work 9 to 5 again.
Yeah.
My schedule is truly my own.
Mm-hmm.
And I do work, you know, long days, but I have like 4 hours off here, 2 hours off there. You know, my work life is very integrated with my personal life. And my wife works from home too. So she's a photographer. So we have we go out to lunch together all the time and do things like that because we can.
You're making the hours that work for you and you're helping people at the same time. I had a guest on my podcast this week and she discovered that she was terminally unemployable. And we laughed and laughed and I'm like, I am too. And Anne-Marie, you are too. Like,
yes, I'm unemployable now. There is no way I could ever go back to a 9 to 5 job.
Way.
Nope.
I loved my corporate working in television. It was my dream job. But now after being my own boss, you can't compare to just have your own schedule. I get to chat with you and then go pick my kids up from school.
For me and my wife, we love to travel. So literally, like, it's that freedom of being able to work from anywhere. If you can arrange your life to do it like that, do it. Yes. It's amazing. It brings happiness.
It really does. Speaking of your traveling, where's your next big trip?
My next big trip is I'm going to the Ghost Ranch in New Mexico because I will be having a retreat there in May of next year, and I really wanted to check it out before I had the retreat there. I'm working with a company called Women Out West Tours, and so I'm doing that the first thing, and then I'm going to tour Utah the next week because I'm having a great retreat. I have 3 spaces left on it called I'm Here, I'm Queer, What's Next? And it's for queer women who are at a crossroads and they need some clarity about what they want to do, whether it's personally or professionally. You can see it all about it on my website and stuff like that.
That sounds great. Let's talk about your podcast as well.
Okay, so my podcast is coming out and beyond. It's LGBTQIA stories. So if you're somebody who's always sort of like questioned or maybe thought maybe I'm gay or maybe I'm not straight, that's where I start with my people. The first season is all later in life lesbians telling their story, except for one trans woman and a friend of mine who's this very cool person who is like came out in 1970 and she's like 75 now. And so she told her story, which was very, very interesting and cool. The second and third seasons are more about like some of the things we deal with. So for example, like in our community, a lot of women realize that they're gay because they fall in love with somebody. It can be a stranger, it can be someone they work with, it can be their best friend. And that's called a catalyst. And a catalyst can be a person or a catalyst can be an event. And that's when you have something significant happen in your life and it makes you realize you need to make some changes. So a divorce, death of parents, death of spouse, illness, either yourself, death of kids. I mean, something really, really seismic earthquake in your life happens. And that's a catalyst. And a lot of people come out through that. So the second and third seasons are much more practical. I had guests on there that can give some really solid advice about things.
That sounds like a great resource for anyone who's...
Yeah, it's actually a great resource for whether you're gay or not, like especially the second and third seasons, if you're an older woman who's getting divorced.
All right, it's time for our 5 fast cues of the week. Here we go. Name one thing that these different chapters in your life have taught you.
To listen to my inner voice.
What is your inner voice telling you today?
Well, I was meditating this morning and it was telling me that I need to go big. So I think my inner voice is telling me that. I need to have my story out there because I would like to share it more. So I want to go big in that way. Speaking, I would love to speak.
Yes. Would you recommend taking a leap into a big life change to your best friend, no matter what that change is?
Yes. Yes, I do. That's what I do every day of my life. Yes.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's about to start their second act or third or fourth?
This is it. Don't listen to the opinions of others. And that goes back to listening to your inner voice. Sometimes people in our life are well-meaning, but their opinions about how we should live our life, what we should do for work, all those things like that, it's more about them than about you. So really learn how to not listen to opinions of others, but also to be able to discern those opinions. Whose opinion is valuable and whose opinion not so much.
Excellent advice.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the next act look like for you? I feel like we kind of touched upon it with the retreats, but just overall, what would you like to see in your next act or chapter?
You know, I've been doing a lot of work lately with my inner child. And, you know, you said about service and everything like that. I'd like to have fun, Shannon. I've done a lot. My life has been filled with a lot of work, tremendous amount of work, and a tremendous amount of caretaking. So I want to have fun. And I would like to not caretake so much. And I would love to share my story, and I can share my queer story. That's fine. But it's so much more than that. It's about not being afraid to make significant changes when you're past 50. Mm-hmm. So I would really like to be an advocate for people who are over 50 who think that they can't like leave a marriage that has nothing for them because, they've put in 25 years or something like that. And really helping people who are past 50 to find their voices and to live their most authentic lives, whether they're gay or straight.
And you're living that. So you are the example to help.
Yeah,
others.
I am. I didn't it wasn't like my intention, but that's what happened.
You're the catalyst, Anne-Marie.
I'm the catalyst. Oh. Oh, that made me laugh.
So where can our audience connect with you? Tell me all of the places, your podcast, your retreats, your website.
I am on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and TikTok now. And I have a website, Anne-MarieZanzal.com, where you can find all my blog posts, all the podcasts, all my press stuff, everything I've ever done is all on that website. And so it's just my name with no hyphen, Anne-MarieZanzal.com.
Wonderful. Anne-Marie, I have just loved our conversation and laughing with you. And I just thank you for sharing your story. And I think it's special because this episode is coming out on October 11th, National Coming Out Day. I know your story is going to help a lot of other people, a lot of other women out there. So thank you for being open enough to share it.
Oh, thank you, Shannon, so much. And thank you so much for the invitation to talk with you about it today.
Anne-Marie has had quite the life, hasn't she? Creating a beautiful family, working in service as a minister, comforting people in hospice, and now she is helping women on their journey of coming out. If you want to connect more with Anne-Marie, all of the links to her social will be in the show notes. And her website is AnneMarieZanzal.com. That's AnneMarieZanzal.com. Make it a fantastic day, my friend, and we'll chat more next time. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found some gems of inspiration and some takeaways to help you on your path to second act success. To view show notes from this episode, visit secondactsuccess.co. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Reviews only take a few moments and they really do mean so much. Thank you again for listening. I'm Shannon Russell, and this is Second Act Success.